Hello and welcome. Today we are going to start with chapter number one of Computer Networking, a top-to-down approach by Jim Corso. So in chapter number one, our goal is to get a big picture of the internet. We will get to know the terminologies that are used in the networks. We'll look at the internet, how the internet structure or infrastructure looks like. What are the nuts and bolts of this internet? We'll talk about the network edges, which means the hosts or the end devices which are connected, the types of the access networks are there, and of course the physical media which is used to connect these hosts to their access networks. We'll talk about the second major component of the internet, that is the network core, where we will be discussing how these packet switching devices like routers and switches, they forward your messages. We'll talk about the performance issues on the internet in terms of loss, delay, and throughput. And finally, we will have a look at the protocol layers or the service models and a very brief discussion about the security of the internet or the networks. So in this figure, you can see the big picture of the internet, which basically shows you what are the different components of the internet. So on one hand, we have these end devices. We can call them hosts, like cell phones, like vehicles, like laptops, PDAs, refrigerator, or any other smart devices which get connected to the networks. Then we have these packet switches, the routers and switches, which are responsible for forwarding the packets from one end host to another end host somewhere on the internet, sitting across the country or across the globe. And then we have the communication links, which is the third component of this internet. And these communication links basically could be a wired communication link or a wireless communication link. For example, you can see here the two routers, they are connected together through a wired link, a physical link. You can see these devices which are connected to the network through the wireless medium. So there are different types of communication links. We will talk about them like fiber optic, copper wire, radio, and satellite. And then we have these blue clouds that basically shows the different types of networks. For example, you can see enterprise network, home networks, mobile networks. Of course, they're different from each other in terms of how you gain access to the internet, but all of these networks, then they are connected to the ISPs. Again, this is another network of the ISPs that you see here in the middle. And on this edge of this internet, we have these content provider networks like Google, for example. So we'll talk about the content provider networks as well. So what is internet? Internet is basically a network of networks. So if you look at this whole picture, it basically represents the current internet infrastructure. And what you see here is that there are different ISPs, hundreds and thousands of ISPs which are connected to each other in order to build this whole internet. And then another very important component of this internet is protocol. So what is a protocol? I'm going to talk about protocol shortly, but in general, protocols are everywhere. So your internet is basically cannot function without these protocols. Most of these protocols, we are using them every single day. Some protocols are user transparent, so we really don't know that this protocol actually exists. But of course, they are on different layers, and that's why. But some of the protocols which we do interact on our daily basis, for instance, we have HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol, which most of the users they are familiar with. We have Skype, we have transmission control protocol, IP protocol, we have SMTP protocol, we have DNS protocol. So uh, this whole course is actually about going deep into this protocol and trying to understand how these protocols work on each layer. Last but not the least, we have internet standards. So all these protocols that I just mentioned, they have technical documents. We call them the RFCs, request for comments. You can find these RFCs on the internet if you're interested in learning about the technical details of these protocols. And most of these RFCs, they're basically written by the IETF, which is Internet Engineering Task Force. Now let's try to understand what is a protocol. Like I said, protocols are everywhere. Even in our daily life, we use protocols every single day. For example, if you want to ask someone a time, there is a protocol that you need to follow to ask for time. So you will start with the greeting, and then if the other person is willing to communicate, then you will ask him the time. Similarly, if, for example, you want to meet your line manager, so there will be a protocol that you need to send an email or call the secretary and book an appointment with him. Then when you get the time, then you have to be there on time, and then you start with the greeting, and then the meeting will continue. So there it is. There is a protocol. So we have these protocols in our daily life. Similarly, on the networks, when these computers or these cell phones or any other devices for that matter, when they communicate with each other, they also need to communicate through some kind of protocol. So we can now define a protocol. That protocol is basically a set of rules which define the format of the messages that are going to be sent, the order in which the messages will be sent and received, and then, of course, what action will be taken when a certain message has been transmitted. And then the protocols also define that if a message is not delivered, then what should happen. So all these ifs and buts are actually covered by these protocols. So going back to our human protocol, you can see here in this example, two people are communicating with each other. So this person, for instance, um, want to ask for time, but she has to start with the greeting, hi, and the other person is going to reply back. And then he can ask the question, what is the time? The other person is going to reply. So this is just an example of a human protocol. You can think of other human protocols, and it is interesting to know how these protocols, they are actually applicable in our daily life. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see an example of a computer protocol. So remember that whenever a client or a computer is trying to access a server, for example, in this scenario, and he's trying to access a web page, which is mentioned here, but before this computer can send a request to access this web page, the computer or the host has to initiate a TCP connection and to actually find out if the server is actually ready to communicate. So there's a TCP connection request. If the server is ready to communicate, the server is going to reply back with a TCP response. And then in the third message, this host is going to request, send a GET request to access this web page. And then, of course, the server is going to serve with the requested web page. So this is just an example of a computer network protocol. Now, don't worry if you do not know what is a TCP connection request and what is the response, because in this course, we are going to cover the transmission control protocol in detail. But for now, you can just understand that it's basically making a request to find out if the server is alive and the server is ready to communicate. So that's the whole purpose here. So let's start our discussion, first of all, with the network edge.